Hello, everyone. My name is Sanjeev Oberoi, and I'm one of the trainers along with Andy for this session on spreadsheets. I will be introducing you some basic functions and formulas you can use to handle data. But first of all, before we begin, a very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for taking time out for this session. As you're aware, that data today is available in large and enormous quantities, and it's very hard to process all this information. It's also very important to make sense of it and to find meaning in the numbers. And this is where spreadsheets play a very important role because they are very useful to analyze information, analyze data sets, and find meaning to them. And for our particular analysis today, the path that I'm taking, I'll be showing you how to use Google Spreadsheets. And Google Spreadsheets are fairly easy to use, and they're very, very simple. And let me just do a quick screen share to show you some of the aspects. As you can see here that I'll be taking you through a particular set here, which is about how to extract information first from the Department of Health. Now, a very basic part about data is how do you first extract it from a web page? And I'm sure that many of us have faced challenges in the past about how to scrape data from a web page onto a Google spreadsheet. Now, if you can just look over here, there's a particular tool I wanted to introduce you to, and this tool is called Table Capture. I'm not going to show you how to install this tool. There'll be a tip sheet available, which you can just go through, and the installation will not take more than 20 seconds. So it's a fairly simple plugin. But once you do that, as you can see on the top right-hand side here, this icon has turned red. And it says that Table Capture has found some tables and has access to this website. Now, when I go to any web page on the internet, and in this case, I have taken some information which is on the coronavirus case numbers and stats from the Department of Health. Now, over here, as you can see, there are a lot of tables available here, okay? And I want to just have a look at how Australia compares with the world in these numbers from the start of the year till mid-September. When I come here, I can see some information that is there country-wise. Now, generally, a lot of us, when we try to extract data from a web page, we most likely just select the information, we do a Control-C and a Control-V, and then we paste it. Now, in this case, it's also possible that this could work or could not work. It's also possible that when copying this information, we may end up copying white spaces and some errors. And that becomes an issue when dealing with or analyzing a data set. In this case, when you click on Table Capture, you will find that this icon tells you, it shows you how many data tables are available there to extract information from. So when I click on it, it tells me that there are specific tables here it has found on the web page that I can scrape data from. So when I click on this, on the back, you can see it has highlighted this information and it has made it available for me to use. Now, when I do that, I can simply click on this one particular table and I can see it is this table 2, selected one, and I can say copy table data to the clipboard. Once I do that, I go to the Google Spreadsheets and I open it up. Now, by doing this over here, what happens is I can simply copy the data from the Google spreadsheet, from the web page onto a Google spreadsheet. Now, as you can see, it tells me here, just paste from your clipboard to import your data. And very simply, in just a matter of a few seconds, I'm going to copy and paste it over here. So let me just do that and I'll show you how it looks. Right, as you can see here, I have managed to scrape all the data from the web page onto this particular Google spreadsheet. Now, once you've done this, the next task is to clean the information. And cleaning the information also is a very, very important task because there are often a lot of errors or a lot of issues in the data set. And some issues that you'll find are, it could be with white spaces, it could be with spelling names which are incorrect, it could be with improper letters, it could be with the dates and times and so on. So for our particular analysis, what I've done is I have created a set here. And before we begin, I can't emphasize how important this is. It's always very, very important to duplicate your data set. So the moment you have copied your information over here, just come here and just duplicate it. This is very important. So you can make whatever changes you want on the duplicate data set and not on the primary one. So once we come over here, you'll find that we have the duplicate data set over here. Now, this is where the cleaning up of the information comes in from. And this is also very, very important. And the first step that you could do essentially is to come to tools and maybe just do a simple spell check. A spell check is very important because it's possible that sometimes when adding names, it's possible that some names have been incorrectly added. As you can see here in this case, it's probably giving you a minor error with the name of Australia. And it says there's an H over there at the end. So we can change this to Australia. It's as simple as clicking on change and making the change. That's one way. Other aspects of cleaning the information is also looking at trimming white spaces and of trimming the white spaces. So when you come to the data tab on the top here, you come down below and you see over here, trim white spaces. When you click on this, it says in this case, there are no selected text to trim. That's fine. Then you come over here and you check out for other issues as well. But one very, very simple issue that I want to tell you to do is to click on cleanup suggestions. Now, this is very important. You'll realize that in Google Spreadsheets, there is one particular function which helps you a lot is to come to the section called data here. In data, come to cleanup suggestions. The moment you come here, it goes through your entire data set and finds out what are the errors in that one data set that you can essentially clean up on. As you can see here in column A, it says there are some column errors that are available right now. So what are they? It shows up here. We can see that the country Turkey has come up twice. So we can remove this. We can see that in the country Chile, there are some white spaces here. We can trim them. So in that sense, we can actually use this option called cleanup suggestions, and we can remove a lot of the errors that are there in the data set. However, after we do this, we also have to generally have a casual glance at the data set to see if everything is fine or not. And in some cases, you'll find here that there's a capital letter. France is in all caps. And so how do you essentially ensure that this is all consistent as well? To do that, once we've done up with the basic stuff of cleaning up data sets, removing the white spaces and the spell checks, we can simply just add a column to the left. And over here, now there are multiple ways of doing this. There is one which is essentially a function called proper. And once we do that, we can simply just choose the cell on the left-hand side and press enter. And we get something known as autofill suggestion. If I do this over here, you will find that it will clean up all the names on the left-hand side and give me a new column. As you can see here, France is in capital. It is now in proper letters. So if I do this over here, I can clean up and make sure that all my country names are properly written. Another option that we can do here is also to use add-ons. Now, there are also multiple add-ons you can add to the Google spreadsheet, and you can use them as well. Over here, I currently have one which is called change case. So if I just click on, say, on France over here, and I click on add-on, I can go to change case and I can say, just change it to the first letter capital. And as you can see, France is now in proper letters. Assuming if you want to make any of the changes, you can also click on any one particular or all the cells in the column, and you can click on them and say, make them all uppercase. So depending on what you want to do, these add-ons are also a very important functionality, and they can help you in also cleaning up your data as well. So once we've got our data from the web page, and we've added a few basic functions like cleaning it. And again, I'll just emphasize the point that when you're cleaning the data, always first make a duplicate of the data set and start to work on the duplicate copy, as that's very important. Once we do that, we'll now go to another part about how to sort and filter the functions. And sorting also is a very, very important part. And it helps you to sort of understand alphabetically where your data is. So when you look at this over here, I have some information on the UN peacekeepers facilities as of 2021. And over here, I have information based on casualty ID. I have it on the nationalities. I have it on the types of incidents. So if you're looking at sorting this information, ideally what you could do is, the first option would be to just come and maybe freeze the first row. This ensures that it is locked. Once you do that, you can come to the option called data. So here on the top, you have a tab called data, and you can sort it depending on the columns you want to do it on. The other option is you can just click on any random cell and you can also sort it that way. So I'll just show you how to do that. I'm just going to do that for you now. And once you come over here, we are going to now sort the information. Sorry, just give me a second. And so I'm just highlighting all the information for myself. And once I've done that, so it's very important first to select all the data in the spreadsheet. And once you do that, you move to data, and then you come to the option called sort range. Once you do that, you'll find that there's an option here where you can say data has a header row. Now, this is very important because it does have a header row, and we want to ensure that it's fixed over there. Once we come here, we can sort based on the parameters we're looking out for. We can sort based on the type of incident, and we can sort ascending or descending. So in this way, I can choose type of incident and I can say sort. And you'll find that it's almost instantaneous where the sorting happens. And you can see that it has sorted alphabetically from accidents all the way to the remaining incidents mentioned over there. Now, assuming you want to do a multi-level sort as well, there is also an option here where you can sort in two ways as well. So you come to data and you again come to the sort range. You click on data as header row, and we are going to now sort by take it by the country name. So we have it by casualty nation, and then we're going to sort it by the type of incident. So over here, I'm sorting it by the country names, from which country they were, the nationalities they were from. And then I'm going to sort it by type of incident. Once I do this, I can say sort. It then sorts the information in that manner for me. Now, in this way, you can actually sort the information, and this helps you to sort of figure out how to, where your data set stands. Now, once you've done this, it's also possible that you now want to maybe go a bit deeper and also look at filtering your information. Now, filtering also is a very, very important aspect. It helps you to sort of give an overview of what's happening with your data set and what's going on in that. And for filtering as well, as you can see here on this particular function, we have something called create a filter. I can click on any one particular cell here and I can say create a filter, and automatically you'll find that the filter option has been added to every column. If I do want to do that, I also have an option of just choosing one particular column and adding a filter to it as well. So in that sense, we can actually do a filter process. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to sort of filter the information as well. So I'm going to just come here and click on the filtration process. The moment I do this, I can now add a bit of conditional filtering to this. Filtering is important because I may want to look at information in a slightly more detailed manner. And I'll show you what I mean by this. Assuming that we're looking at date-wise information. And in date-wise information, we have, I want to see the information, say, beyond a certain year. Say I want to see it beyond 1960. So when I come over here, I can just do clear all, and I can come here in this option here, and I can choose date is after, and I can choose exact date, and I can put here 1960. Okay, by doing that, I can just add okay. And as you can see that the filtration process happens. Let me just sort of figure this out 1 second. So I'm doing a filter by condition, and I am doing it by the date is after, and I'm doing it for the exact date, and I'm adding the values here. Just give me a second. So I will just add this as 1957, and I will just make the change. So once you do that, you'll find that all the incident date has filtered the information, and it has given me all the information after 1957. So as I can see, I have all the cases that have happened country-wise and incident-wise after 1957 onwards, all the way till 2021. So in this way, we can actually use filtering to get a more detailed analysis of our work. Now, assuming you want to also save a particular aspect of it, you want to just keep one part of it and refer back to it later, you can also add what is called as a filter view. So when you again come back to this option over here, you have something known as save as filter view. When you click on save as filter view, you'll find that you can actually, it opens up a black sort of an outline for you. And over here, you can essentially just give this a name. So you can say after 1957, and you can simply close this information. Once you do that, you can always refer back to it later by going to the section here called data, by coming to filter views and clicking here after 1957. Once you do that, it reopens it for you. Okay, so you can always refer back to it as well. So in that sense, you can actually use filtering, get a more sort of an overview, a detailed analysis of your data sets. So essentially, these are some of the tools I wanted to show you about. And using sorting and using filter, you can actually get into a slightly more detailed analysis of using your data sets and going a lot more deeper. We also have some additional information available for you to go through later on, but we'll get back to that later. And now my co-trainer, Andy, will be showing you how to use pivot tables, and I'll just hand it over to him. Just give me a second. I'll just stop the screen sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sanjeet. It's a pleasure doing this with you today. And welcome to everyone in attendance to this GIJN conference. You've gotten to meet Sanjeet. My name's Andy Laren. I work with NBC News in New York, and previously I've been with the New York Times. I've also done training with IRE and GIJN, so it's just an absolute pleasure to be with you all today. I'm going to talk about pivot tables, and I think I'll actually begin with a table that Sanjeet was just showing you. So let me go to that one and share it with you. You should have a copy of it yourself. And before we begin doing pivot tables, I think it'd be really important to make sure that everyone kind of understands what it is that we're looking at. So this is a database since the beginning of the United Nations of UN peacekeepers who've died in the course of their duties. And it goes all the way back to the 1940s. It comes from the United Nations, so it is a complete data set. Now, when you get it, you may look at it and you'd be like, oh, wait, it's not showing all of the column headers. I want to see them all. And just know that you can quickly highlight your table by going to this upper left corner here, highlighting your table, it all turns gray, and then just double clicking at one of the gaps in between. And the spreadsheet will just automatically fill out so that you could see all of the column headers. And I think most of this spreadsheet is self-explanatory, but we'll go through it anyway. So the first is the Casualty ID, which is essentially the UN's identification number and letters to a particular death. So each ID is particular to one casualty. It tells us the date of the death. We get a mission acronym, and that's something we'll need to look up later, but essentially it tells us which part of the world, which mission was the United Nations engaged in where this fatality occurred. You'll see that when you go here, it says type of casualty, and everything here says fatality. We only have fatalities in here. It's actually kind of a clue that makes you think that the United Nations also has a database, not just of fatalities, but injuries as well. And then we have a casualty nation code. And of course, Sanjeet was just going through how to clean up some of these. The United Nations actually gives it to you here 3 different ways. You get the spelled out version of the country name. You get a United Nations code for that country, M250. And by the way, this is not the nationality where the fatality occurred. It's the nationality of the soldier who passed away. So we have the spelled out name, we have an identification number of the country, and then we also have a different 3-letter abbreviation of that country, this ISO code. We learn what kind of person this was, whether it was a military observer or someone actually in the military, civilian, things like that. And then we learn the type of incident that's going on. So that's that's what's in our data. So now that you're familiar with that, just to show you a couple other things, there are code sheets for this. So if you actually want to know what missions we're talking about, these are the different UN missions that are available. So some are on the Indian-Pakistani border, some involve Angola, some have been in Georgia or Liberia or Haiti. And there've been actually numerous UN missions in Haiti. Some have been in Sudan. So you can see where they are around the world. So we get an idea of that. And since we are doing this in Google Sheets, move now to Google Sheets. Great. So now you see this, and again, my columns headers are a little bit truncated. I want to widen them. I'll go here and it'll widen them. Okay, so I have my columns here. Now I want to create a pivot table. How do you do that? It's actually not terribly difficult to first create it, but we will have some big questions we'll need to ask ourselves to actually make sense of this. So what I want you to do first is you highlight your table. Just go again to this upper left-hand box. It hides the table. And then we're going to go to data. And we're going to go to pivot table. It's going to ask us a question. Do we want to put our table inside this sheet, or do we want to create a new sheet? And Sanjeet was talking earlier about wanting not to mess too much with your original data. Always work off copies. Very good practice. When I create pivot tables, I create it in a brand new sheet, so it does not confuse me. So in this case, I'll create a brand new sheet. And there I will have the beginnings of a pivot table. But I have some choices to make. And this is really where it comes down to you as a journalist. You need to kind of have a sense of what it is you want to ask. I always look at a database or a spreadsheet as like a source. They know certain things. In this case, my source can tell me a lot about who died in a UN mission. It can tell me what country they're from and maybe some of the circumstances they were in. It can tell me about the date of when they passed away. It cannot tell me about what was the soldier feeling. Did the soldier leave behind family members? This spreadsheet is good for certain things and not good for other things. The same way any source that we interview for a story is that way. So why do I ramble on like this? We have choices to make. We can't just automatically start shoveling things around. We want to know what it is we're trying to seek. So as you go through this data, you may write down a list of questions the way you might before any interview. What are some of the questions that I may have? Well, maybe what you want to know is which country has seen the most fatalities in UN missions. And you want to see a rank of who has seen the most casualties in the course of the United Nations. Well, if that's the case, I'll just go over here to UN casualty. I'll put it under row. And you can see it begins populating that list with a list of countries. It's kind of a long list, sadly. And now let's say I want to begin counting things. So what's really good to know about your data is which column is filled out all the time. And in this case, if you go back to our original table, you could check here and you'll see that every casualty has an ID number. There's not a single casualty here that does not have an ID number. And that happens a lot with databases. There's almost always some column that's always filled out. And in the efficiency of this agency of the United Nations, they want to make sure they always have an ID number. So I'm going to bring this over to values. So I want to count the number of casualties. And you can see here that it starts filling in the numbers, beginning to be useful. A couple things you may notice right away is it doesn't know the nationality of every UN peacekeeper. Apparently there's one that it does not know. So that's interesting and worth noting. What else does it have here? It has a list of countries, but it may have some countries here that may not exist anymore. Maybe they've changed their names. So you want to be careful about that because things have changed over time. You know, if you're looking from people from Sudan, maybe this is from before when South Sudan was created. So you just want to be careful to understand the geography of what it is that you're looking at. And at the end, it gives us a total that tells us that we're looking at about 4,138 casualties. And in addition to having that blank country, you'll also notice here at the end that there are 14 soldiers for whom the country is undetermined. So there, you may want to do some data cleanup and maybe include the blank with that category. That's a decision you may wish to make later, but it is important to understand your data. Now, it may be that you want to then sort your data. So in this case, my data has a header row. I'm going to sort now. Went to data sort, my data has a header row. And I want to sort not by the nationality, but by the count. And almost always in journalism, you want to have the highest number first that we'll be sorting from. So, oops, went away. We'll go back to sorting this. Apologies, header row, count, sort. No, it's not letting me do that. Quickly fix that. You know what? I'm going to actually solve this problem very quickly. I'm going to copy this table. I'm going to insert a new worksheet and move all my data there. And I'm going to take it out of oops, let me do this back. Second. Copy this, insert, and put it in a insert my table. And I'm going to do a paste special. I'm just going to insert the values here. So now I can more easily do my sorting. Data sort range has a header row. I'm going to do it by the count. And then I'll see that India, followed by Bangladesh, followed by Nigeria and Pakistan, have seen the most soldiers die in the course of UN missions. And I can see how it is with the grand total there. I may wish to do a percentage to figure out what's the percentage of Indian soldiers out of all, but that's not the point of this lesson today. We're just doing pivot tables. So, so you can see you could then sort and figure out which country has seen the most soldiers pass away. Now, that may not be the only thing you wish to count. So now I'm going back to my pivot table. So again, you'll see this is it's a live pivot table. So every time you change things, it will reorder. We will now go and take away our two columns. We'll go back to the very beginning. Now, maybe what you wish to see is which mission has seen the most casualties. In this case, what you would do is you would take the mission, put it in your row. You can see all the missions. And then you may want to take, again, do you want to count them? So we'll go back now to values. And now it is telling us all of the count of all the missions. Do the same thing again. I'll copy this, create a new pivot table, quickly paste it. Again, I'm pasting only the values. So now I'll resort the data. I'll go to data, sort range, has a header value. And now I can see which mission has seen the most fatalities. And again, at this point, I don't really understand these codes. I may wish to go to my code sheet. So if you may recall, when we started this, I showed you a code sheet. So in this case, it's the one that has seen the most casualties is UNIFIL, UNIFIL. So if I just now go to my lookup sheet, I can see, that's the UN interim force that's been in Lebanon from 1978 to the present. So I know which mission now has seen the most casualties. And I could conceivably compare missions. And if I wish, I could bring this PDF at some point into my spreadsheet and maybe figure out the number of casualties over time, which one has seen the most rates. But again, that's not the point of this lesson. We're just focusing on the spreadsheets and pivot tables. So now I'm going to go, so that's how you could use the code sheet to make sure you understand what it is that you're looking at. I'm going to go back to my database. And at this point, by the way, you may wish to do things like rename your sheets. So, so I may do this by, I may call this summary most deaths by UN mission. And now I've saved that result. If I go over here, I may want to save this as, summary deaths by country. Now, so that now I'm saving my work as I go along, which I think is a good practice. You take this away. And again, you may have other questions about this. So you may say, clear off my pivot table. So again, it's just a series of choices. You may say like, well, I want to know which type of person has died the most. So here, I bring this in again into my row header area. I took casualty personnel type and put it into rows. And now I'm going to, I'll want to count this. So I could take this into values. Oh, I did put it in the wrong spot. Forgive me. Casualty ID, put it into values. There we go. And it's very easy to see, those in the military have died the most, followed by local people, followed by international civilians, followed by police. This one's a short list, so you may not need to actually go and create a separate sheet. You can just quickly see, these are the people who've died the most. And you could, again, do percentages if you wish. So you're beginning to see how we could create these 2-column pivot tables. But it may be that you want to do more than just 2 columns. These are just, very simple tables to look at. Maybe you want to do something a little bit more complicated. So maybe one of your questions is that by the nationality of the person who died, what was their role? What kind of personnel were they? So in this case, we'll begin by taking the nationality and we'll put it into rows. Looks a little bit similar to where we started off. But now when we go into columns, we'll take the columns and we'll put in casualty personnel type. And you can see how it's beginning to fill that out. And you can look across and you can see that it's created a grid essentially. So I could know how many people from Afghanistan who died who were in the military or were police or were observers. Now I can take the casualty ID and actually, let me just scroll down a bit so it creates a space for me. And again, I'll create a count. So now I could see, I could do percentages off this table. I could begin to see, like what percentage of those who died who were from Afghanistan were in the military. In this case, it's kind of easy. It's going to be 100%, but some countries have people from multiple columns, and like Australia, in which case you could do percentages. You may remember we looked earlier, and India had the most deaths involving UN missions. So in this case, we could go and, if we wanted to later process this, we could go to India, and as we do our percentages, we could see, what percentages of India's casualties are from the military. So that's another way that you can go about this. And what I would do is I would again copy and paste this, put it into a new sheet, and then begin to do that additional math. But the purpose of the pivot table is it lets you do this kind of summary information. You're able to compress a lot of information and find the journalistic answers to the questions that you seek. We could, again, go and do something else. So for instance, like we could go and say, well, instead of the casualty type, I'm going to instead do it by the casualty mission. And in this case, I could begin to see which missions have had soldiers of a particular country have died in. And again, the missions will be at the top. It's a little bit longer because there were far more missions than there were a type of military personnel. But you can go and see what the mission count is. So that's another way you could look at the data. There's one other way that you could look at it, which is you could take the casualty type and look at that. So in this case, I'm sorry, not casualty type, type of incident I meant to grab, apologies. So now we have the type of incident, and this will tell us, and I put that into the column header here. So again, I have my countries listed as a row, and as the column headers, I chose the type of incident, and I kept the casualty ID, the count of the casualty ID in my values. And now you can see, you can begin to look at, okay, people from UN peacekeepers from Afghanistan, how did they die? And you can begin to see that actually most of them died from illness. You could see that, there are, 12 of the 44 peacekeepers from Austria died from self-inflicted wounds. So you can begin to analyze this data and maybe explore more about why it is that certain UN peacekeepers have died. So really, to review again, when we're doing pivot tables, the first thing is to be familiar with your data. And then the second thing is, once you're familiar with it, begin to think of the questions you wish to ask your data and kind of envision what those results may look like. In this case, I've focused a lot on trying to see country by country results. I looked at country by results by the number of deaths, by taking the country nationality and putting it into rows, by taking the casualty ID and putting it into values, column putting it into values, getting counts. I've done things like saved my results so I can go back to it and not have to redo the pivot table every time. And then I've decided to do more things by breaking it down and maybe seeing, by the incident type or by the mission type, who are the soldiers from a particular country who died, and you can see it summarized. So from here, I could copy and paste it and do additional work like, which percentage of UN soldiers died in accidents the most, which ones died in an illness, which ones died by suicide. You could begin to analyze all that information this way. So this gives you a good sense of UN peacekeepers who have died in the course of various missions. Okay, so we have about 12 minutes left. And I always think like one of the best ways to really understand a new skill, in this case pivot tables, is maybe you can do it in one spreadsheet, but what if you can do it, can you do it again in a different spreadsheet and really understand how a pivot table works? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a different data set, and let's see how we can do with that. So I'm going to share my screen. You should have a second Google Sheet spreadsheet that you can work with. And in this case, this is from the World Health Organization, the WHO, and it tells us about COVID numbers. And it tells us COVID numbers in extreme details. It gives us day-by-day reports. It gives us country codes, gives us the names of the country. The WHO, in addition to countries, has regional codes. So you can see the regional codes here. It gives us the number of cases and the number of deaths. It does this country by country, day by day. And if you scroll down to the end, you will see that this is a much longer spreadsheet than the previous one we worked with. The previous one we worked with was about 4,000 plus rows. This one is more than 150,000 rows, country by country, day by day, during the course of this pandemic. So again, you would copy all this, you would go to data and create a pivot table, right? And create it in a new sheet. In this case, I've created it already, and it is right here. It might take a little bit of a while to load up because this is a bigger spreadsheet, but that's why I created one already for you to work from. So delete this one because it does take a little bit of time to load up. Just know that this here is a version of the pivot table we just created. It takes a little bit of time to load up. Google, again, is, you'll notice here, it's trying to suggest how we may want to look at the data. We're going to ignore that because most of the time it'll kind of guess in ways that may not make much sense to us. So let's begin by repeating the same skills that we did in the previous spreadsheet. So before, we were doing a lot of counting. We were counting the deaths of UN peacekeepers. In this case, we're going to be counting the cases or the deaths of people who got COVID. And that's going to be as reported to the WHO. So there'll be caveats. If a country has bad reporting or there's some reporting issues, we may not be able to have reliable statistics. But in this case, I'll begin to populate my table. I moved country over to rows. So very similar to the way we were looking at the countries of where the soldiers were from. In this case, we'll be looking at the countries of where the COVID cases were from. And again, because it is a bit of a longer table, it is going to, might take a few moments to load, but just be patient, it will get there. So we have the countries, and let's say what I want to summarize are the deaths. So I'm going to take deaths, I'm going to bring it to values. And it's going to guess what it is that we wish to do. Before we were counting, and now you'll notice what we're doing is we're summarizing. So we are summarizing the total number of deaths. widen this column. And again, you may want to say, well, according to the United Nations, according to the WHO, according to the the reporting that's been done, and again, the reporting may be suspect, but and almost certainly is, but these are the best world numbers out there, or one of the best. So let's begin to go and analyze this more. Again, I'm going to copy this like I did before. I'm going to go and create a blank sheet. I'm going to paste just the values. Got my deaths and country by country, and I'm going to sort it, and I'm going to say my sheet has a header row. Do it by the total number of deaths, largest to smallest, and we'll see that the United States, followed by Brazil, followed by India, followed by Mexico, has been leading the world in COVID deaths. So that's one way you could look at this data. You will notice you could do some other things with this. So here it's giving you the total number of deaths. You could also do something like, over the same period of time, maybe what's the how else maybe we want to do this out. Who had the worst day, the single worst day? So in that case, instead of choosing the summary, I chose the max. What's the max number? Now, you could do the same thing, by the way, Sanjeet was showing you earlier, by resorting your spreadsheet, but you could also do it in a pivot table, and it'll resort it. And again, you could copy and paste it and see what this shows as far as the total number of deaths. And in this case, you'll be seeing on which day did the most number of people die from a particular country. But most likely, working with this, you're going to want to have a total number of deaths. We're creating a sheet of the total number of deaths. And that can be one case that we may want to look at. We may want to also have, at the same time, a summary of the number of cases. And if you'll notice what I just did there is I went to new cases, clicked, and brought it over to values, summarized the number of new cases. So by new cases, this would not be double counting previous cases, just day by day number of new cases. In this case, I could copy this spreadsheet. And here I see like both, again, the number of deaths, the number of new cases, country by country. Copy this. Create a new pivot table. I'm sorry, not a new pivot table, a new table. I'll bring in just the values. In this case, I may want to do something like see the percentage of deaths to cases. Just very quickly do the math, create a formula, and suggest some. And then I can quickly turn this to %. Then let's try to already do that as a %. Take that away. Let's just go back to numbers. I did my math wrong, by the way, so apologies for that. I meant to do the percentage of deaths to cases. It should be B2 divided by C2. I just made a mistake, please forgive me. Live training. Okay, And in this case, I do the percentage, and I can see the percentage of people who died. So I may want to rank that table that way. That might be interesting and newsworthy. In this case, I'll go. So this is where there are no deaths. That's why it has that weird number here. But then you can see in countries like Yemen, Sudan, Peru, the percentage of people who died as opposed to the reported number of cases. You can see how things play out. So that's a way that you could take a pivot table, copy the results, and then maybe do some additional math or additional work. So we only have a couple minutes left here. So I just want to go back and again, revisit what it is we've done. We've worked in pivot tables. We've brought in data from different agencies. You could maybe have created your own data. We then kind of envisioned our results. And if this class was live, I certainly would take suggestions from the audience and certainly wish I could be with you live. But since we are taping this, in this case, I chose country. And I just said, well, whatever it is I'm going to be doing, I want to look at countries. I make that my rows. And in this case, I want to summarize things because pivot tables, really their value is for taking fast data sets or smaller data sets and summarizing things. And in this case, I wanted to look at the total number of deaths. Google Sheets guesses that I want to do it by the total number. In this case, it guessed correctly. And then I can look at country by country totals of deaths. And again, you could rearrange it. You could bring in the new cases as well, have a second column where the math is being done. You could also do things like, well, maybe I don't want to look at countries. I just want to look at regions. So I want to look at WHO regions, bring those over, look at cases, and then I could see which UN region, taking a while, oops, sorry, put in the wrong area, which UN region has had the most number of deaths, and it'll begin to populate that as well. So there are a lot of ways you can go through your data, but the important thing is to figure out what you want in your rows, what you wish to have in your columns, and just get cracking at it. And hopefully you find this valuable. I know that Sanjeet and I would love to hear from you. So just feel free to get in contact with us through GIJN. And I wish you all the very best as you work through spreadsheets. So thank you so much for your time today, and look forward to talking with you soon. Sanjeet, do you have any questions about what I did that maybe I should have covered?
No, that's great. I think it was quite detailed, and I'm sure the participants will find it useful. I think you also mentioned you're sharing the sheets with them as well, so they can
Correct.
them and try it out as well.
With all the data that we have here, we'll be providing this to GIJN, so you'll be able to get the data yourself directly from us, and you can move it right into Google Sheets. Thank you so much, Sanjeet. It's been great doing this with you.
Likewise.
Great. Take care. Bye, everybody.